Guess what? Guess what just happened?
I know.
This is where you say a guess. Say it to the screen. No! We just recorded this video, but one of the silly geese here in the room forgot to stop the recording before he took out the card from the camera, and so we're going to record this video again. This is round 2.
It'll just be better.
Yeah, just improve it this time. So, take it away, silly goose. He should go ahead and honk, you know, because he's going to go back to the pond. He's going to be such a silly goose. This video is about teaching people who have never played D&D to play D&D. And there's a lot of good stuff in here. And we're actually excited to share it with you. And it's kind of nice in a way that we get to share it with you.
We're sharing it with you twice. Well,
again.
We would have been sharing it with you twice.
Just picture a different video that's almost the same as this one.
Only this one's better.
Better. Let's get started.
So, in 1980, June, July of 1980, in Different Worlds magazine, which is a great role-playing magazine, a man by the name of Robert Harder came out with an article called Teaching Role-Playing. Mm-hmm. And to me, there's a lot of really good stuff in this, because even though this is 43 years old, it still applies today to introducing the things that he discusses still apply to introducing people to role-playing games today.
Very much so.
I'm going to have to read some of this just because I'm pulling it out of an article. That's really the only way that I can get it across to you. Mm-hmm. So just imagine, just kick back, close your eyes, get your favorite beverage, and listen to me as I regale you with voice.
Tell you about how.
Still looking for that co-host. If you guys are interested, fill out an application and send it.
I'm going to deny it.
You'll never know. So, Teaching Role-Playing by Robert Harder. Mr. Harder, if you are out there, I'd love to hear from you.
So would I.
He starts off by saying, ever wonder why role-playing games are not played by more people? Again, this is 1980. Not a huge population playing the games back then. One reason is that certain game masters may be excellent for experienced players, but should not be running first-level adventures for beginners. Most people become dungeon masters or game masters because they desire to utilize all the neat, complex structures of the game system. Invoking all this on beginners is the quickest way of losing new players. So what makes a good game master for beginners and what does not? Well, first and foremost, an adventure is a social gathering and should be organized and planned as such. I agree with that.
No.
Invite from 2 to 4 people and inform them of when the adventure starts and when it will end.
Yes.
The total time, according to Mr. Harder, should not exceed 3 hours.
Indeed.
And should have a formal 15-minute break at the halfway point. Mm. Pay attention to the personalities involved. Avoid those who must bring their children, those who are always late, or those who bring along uninvited friends. Consider the feelings of those who are smokers, non-smokers, drinkers, and non-drinkers. Either run an adventure consisting of young people or one of adults. Do not try to mix the two.
Never.
Don't do that.
It's forbidden.
The biggest mistake is to invite an experienced person. Although the experienced person will tell you that they will lay back and play a retiring cleric, a campaign is a campaign and they will overshadow the group every time. They also have a tendency to boast and show their prowess to the neophytes. Overall, they inhibit both the party and the GM. In this setting, the GM is the experienced person, helper, teacher, and lastly, game master. He goes on to say that when you are doing this beginner scenario, introduce and describe only the rules you plan to use during the adventure, and to design the adventure around those rules. For example, if there are no undead creatures in the adventure, do not inform the cleric of their ability to dispel the undead. It's just confusing. People are going to be overwhelmed by what they need to remember. If they're not going to be using it, don't introduce them to it initially. They can find out about those things later.
And if they ask questions about it, answer those questions, but don't, make apparent. You don't need to know this right now. It's not something you're going to be using today.
Right. Yeah, just if they have a question, answer it, but say, don't focus.
Don't worry about that.
Rules extraneous to the adventure will waste time and detract from the enjoyment of the game. The enjoyment also hinges on the type of adventure that you provide, so make it out of the ordinary, like a dungeon or an abandoned space station. Village adventures with offending creatures at taverns and evil merchants should be avoided, as it sometimes closely resembles real life. Another reason that I think that you should be putting people into a dungeon on their first adventure, spaceship, whatever, you want to keep them confined, because it limits the amount of choices that they have to make. You can easily confront them with problems that have to be overcome, but there are usually going to be a limited number of solutions to those obstacles.
Yeah.
And you really want to keep people on a track so that they play the game in a direct, concise manner, and they don't have to be confused by what might be going on outside of their track. They don't have to worry about politics. They don't have to worry about anything other than, I'm supposed to get into room X and steal treasure Y. That's really all they need to be focused on in this type of a beginning game.
Yeah, and I think that that's super important, because I think it's tough for people who play the game sometimes to remember that this is a pretty new idea. These aren't games that people who've never played them have any sort of experience with, and might not even know even vaguely how it works. Like, a lot of people have heard of Dungeons and Dragons, but you know, looking at games like the Game of Life, it's a very easy to understand pattern. You do this, 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 and this. If you do these things, you win the game. So you have a very concise set of goals. This is a lot more abstract. It's now acting. It's, you know, putting all these other different ideas into a game that you have complete free reign and control over within a pretty broad set of rules. So don't necessarily force them to have too many conversations in a role-playing setting, because that's difficult to do. That's a skill you kind of have to figure out as you have more experience with the game.
Well, but I think that some people excel at it.
They do.
Right out of the gate, but a lot of people do not.
And it's really intimidating all of a sudden.
And they won't want to come back and play if they feel that they have to do that to the same level that some of the other more outgoing people do.
Yeah, especially if it's something that you're maybe a shyer person, or you get more embarrassed easily. You might not feel comfortable being this very boisterous, very, you know, out there person straight out of the gate. So getting them used to these ideas are super important.
Yep. He continues by referring to an article that appeared in Different Worlds magazine called Mastering Your First Adventure. And he talks about how the adventure gets started sooner if the dungeon master or game master has a set of character sheets prepared. Put each character on a separate sheet of paper and list in an organized fashion the statistics for that character. Explicitly label the hits to kill number needed, the savings modifiers, so this is in the day when you're rolling saving throws. Just make it the number. You have to roll this number to not be affected by poison. And the 2 hit modifiers. In order to hit somebody in chainmail armor, you get this bonus because of your dexterity. Avoid any notations. In other words, don't include +2 TH / +1 M +3 SVS. Don't do any of that kind of stuff. Just give people a number that they know they need to accomplish, or roll on those funny dice in order to be successful in whatever it is they're trying to attempt. Outfit the characters on that sheet that you're providing them with just the things that they're going to need. Don't give them a bunch of stuff that they have to wade through to be saying, well, how, is this 2.5 pound rock going to be valuable in this? No, just don't even include the 2.5 pound rock. Stick to just the things that you think they're going to need to accomplish the adventure. This can be extremely important because it takes all of the information that the player is going to need to play the game, and it puts that in one spot. They don't need to look anywhere else. They don't need to go through books. Everything that they need is right there in front of them on the table.
Yep.
Then it goes on to Mr. Harding goes on to Mr. Harder goes on to talk about the way that this should all be structured. And we've already talked about how keeping it confined is a really good idea. Don't let them wander too far off the rails. Keep them on those rails for this first adventure so that they get to learn the game.
Yeah.
For example, suppose the main objective of your evening is for the players to obtain a statue from somewhere for a church. The statue is located in a locked room in an old temple. Recently, some thieves stole the magic key to that locked room. The party reaches the old temple and explores the first room they encounter. The sub-objective here would be to find the secret door that leads to room number 2. The second room contains a passageway which leads to the room with the statue. However, the thieves are in that second room, and the party must fight the thieves for the magical key that allows them to get into the room with the statue. Just as the last thief is overcome, she tosses the key into another room that is full of traps, and of course the key lands way at the back of that trap-filled room. The sub-objective here is to get around the traps and get the key. So the players are learning all of these different things that they have to learn to play the game because you've set up these simple objectives for them to try and figure ways to overcome. Once this is accomplished, the group heads to the statue room. Inside, they find a very high-level neutral monster. The objective is to bargain with the creature for the statue and then return to the church. 4 encounters here, all of them must be experienced to complete the objective of fetching the statue. So it's very simple. It's all very straightforward, but you've got combat in there because that's going to be kind of a basic thing.
It's a pretty important thing for the game.
Exactly. Yeah. But then you've also got overcoming traps. Well, how do you go about doing that? Then you've also got, instead of attacking the monster at the end, you
thinking through a solution.
Exactly. You bargain with them. You come up with some other method of overcoming that obstacle other than fighting.
Yeah.
So I think that that's actually very, very good in terms of laying out how this is all going to take place.
I think another good thing to look at would be the example adventure they give in the DM's guide. Because that, if I recall properly,
the AD&D DM's
guide. The AD&D DM's guide seems to have a pretty good mixture of different things that they have the imaginary adventurers go through.
I haven't looked at that for a long time. You might be right.
Yeah. If I remember right, there was a pretty good variety of stuff they have to overcome. So check it out, I guess, if you want some other inspiration for a mixture of things.
He goes on to talk about, he read in another magazine that clues in this beginning adventure should be as vague as possible. My experience, Mr. Harder's experience, and mine differ. Properly formulated clues that are useful and necessary to completing objectives keep interest at a high level, and I agree with that 100%. The players are always trying to figure out the puzzle, and that's what you want in any role-playing game. They need to be figuring out the puzzle. It could be a huge puzzle. It could be a political puzzle that covers continents, or it could be a puzzle of how you get something out of a box in the back room of a tavern.
Yep.
But there should always be those puzzles that make people have to think. Most good fiction, he goes on to say, most good fiction has a plot or mystery to solve from clues and hints. Have your adventure possess those same qualities. He goes on to talk about filling your adventure with small items to investigate and small obstacles to overcome. These can be inscriptions along walls with clues, plants and vines along the floor, or a caved-in portion with debris that must be removed in order to continue. Keep these things interesting and potentially useful, but limit them into something that can be accomplished or overcome in 5 minutes. All these ideas can keep interest in the game, but if there are a few overzealous players hogging all the action and getting all the experience, try this. Make a form with the following headings: melee round, action, item in hand. Inform the group that when the Dungeon Master, says action, they have 15 seconds to write down their actions to whatever you have told them is occurring. If at the end of that time limit nothing is written down, then it is assumed that the person stood there in shock. Allow the players to discuss what is happening during that 15 seconds, but at the end of the time, all reactions must be on paper. Review quickly what each person wrote to get a feel for the confusion and then proceed to resolve the actions player by player. Besides forcing individual thought and action and toning down the role of the boisterous players, this technique brings a certain degree of honesty. Haven't we all modified our actions during a round based on what has happened to our fellow adventurers who related their actions to the Dungeon Master prior to us? It's a very good point. Anyway, just some really good ideas, I think. Some real good techniques for coming up, for making that first game for people easier.
Palatable. Because it is, again, I've said this before, it's a complicated thing to understand, and it's tough to get people enticed because they're really thick books. There's a lot of them, and they think that you might have to understand everything in those books to play the game, and you certainly do not, especially if you go back and look at some of the videos where we talk about what we actually use out of the books. It's a pretty small sliver out of the overall things we could be using.
Out of the guide books, not the rule books, the
guide books, of course, yes. But I hope you've enjoyed this second coming of...
Yeah, I screwed it up, okay? I turned the thing on.
It's his fault.
It's my fault.
Yeah, everyone yell at him in the comments below. Do it. Do it. Make him feel bad.
If you have any suggestions about ways that you introduce people to the game or ways that you treat new players, let us know.
There's a lot of different ways to go about it, so it would be interesting to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, we'd love to know. As always, thank you to our Patreon subscribers who make this channel possible.
Thank you guys.
You guys keep us afloat, and we really, really appreciate your efforts.
Yes.
And we look forward to hearing from you guys on some things we're sending your way. We do Patreon-specific content, so
we do.
Guys, it'll be coming your way.
And if you're interested in checking that out, go ahead. But if not, no worries at all. You're more than welcome here on the main channel. Anytime you want to be having some good old-fashioned Dungeons & Dragons content.
Okay, I'm Jim.
I'm Alex.
Keep it short on free.
Bye-bye.